where because we were on Shark Tank, this stuff needed like roller coasters, right? For you to find your co-founders, it is a general curve of 6 to 8 months, and which is inevitable, right? It is inevitable that you will not have learning, even on the high level management, who has to agree on making those mistakes. That boss, when you're putting in money in a company, that money is not being put that it will run indefinitely, right?
When I look at you, right, you having a finance background, getting into an ed tech, come child tech, come fintech business, the tech aspect, to complement your skills from a finance and from an education perspective, what was your experience been to hire a CTO, come a tech
Right.
person to ensure? And I've been through my own personal journeys, and I can understand how difficult it can be to get the right tech person and the tech ecosystem, because it can get very easily out of space, right, for you and for anybody.
Correct. It's very important to have technology by your side, though it's not very cheap anymore, right?
Yeah.
The world used to outsource to India, where I think we're becoming very competitive in terms of what that demands. There is a whole new world of smaller countries now also developing this technology outsourcing area globally perspective. But if you ask my personal journey with Good Piggy, initially we showed this off to a venture builder who could help build bring his resources and build an MVP which could be tested. Though I think we ran too fast.
Okay.
Too fast, where because we were on Shark Tank, this stuff needed like roller coasters, right?
Yes.
So ideally MVPs would be like forms, would be smaller stuff that you can do to validate, but suddenly here there was users who wanted a product in their hand, right? So we were actually trying to jump or fast track that entire process into rapid answering. So there was a venture builder who helped us with MVP, but I think outsourcing a product to a partner to build might not be the best decision. And if you ask me, I mean, there's a whole issue, right, where they would not want to involve so many resources. You have your own speed in terms of business. Matching that delivery standard becomes very difficult. Also, as a non-tech founder, signing off stuff that you want in technology also becomes very difficult, because when a technical person technically comes into your zone and looks at what you have signed off, can take out a lot of mistakes in it, because you're signing off stuff or asking requirements from a non-technical aspect, right? So there's a whole lot which is behind that non-technical aspect which needs to be technically done. And so it's merit, I would say, to start with somebody who knows technology. Though for Good Piggy that was not the case. But having said so, every entrepreneur needs their own time to build that team, right? Again, we were pushed to be on roller coasters. But if you were a founder who's getting into this scenario, for you to find your co-founders, it is a general curve of 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
Where you will sit, you will talk to people, you will convince them, you will find out, you will work together, etc. But when you're on national television in 2 months, that time is not there for you, right? You can't take 6 months to find somebody. So over time, we found somebody who could be our tech lead. He was working in a leading bank and kind of helping us out as an advisor, consultant, etc., to take delivery from this outsourcing company. And then suddenly you realize that there's a whole lot of technological requirements that person can add to that outsourcing company, and then that gap comes in place where your expectations now have risen because you're speaking the language, and the outsourcing company who is building your product would be resource defensive in that situation. So that was our story. We then invested in a team who could test the delivery from the outsourcing company. We also understood in that scenario a lot of the stacks that the company puts in to bring in speed, right? And then you need to substitute those stacks so that your IP is entirely yours. So we've done that process, and the product that is there out in the market right now is a product we received from that company, and we have internalized in terms of our IP. But now when you have your own team of your own product, your own UX, your own developers, your own DevOps, when you have that team entirely is when you can start checking those assumptions, validating it, and creating something which could be closer to a fit to the user's problem. So I think that has been our curve, where of course raising funds definitely helps paying off those salaries. It's not easy to pay off a tech team. I realize that, right? It's an expensive job. to have that minimum team with you. Second thing that I've also learned is a lot of companies and startups do not want to immediately have such heavy cost resources on your
Mm-hmm.
payroll, right? Because that's a responsibility of keeping people on your payroll when you are with limited runway. So on that note, I think we ended up taking people on, taking up people who could be loan staff to you as
Yeah.
resources. That itself becomes very expensive, and we
Mm-hmm.
understood the kind of extra expense you end up paying. So there was a discovery for us as well, where somebody who would, who we are paying off, let's say in terms of a huge number,
Mm-hmm.
the end person is actually getting
A
one
meager
fourth
amount.
that
Yeah.
cost. Yeah, a really small amount. So over time, I think we've had those experiences of technology, and we've understood that it's better to keep at least tech folks on your salary, keep that architecture lean, and then use contracts to help create some sort of sponge for yourself as a company.
Now, Purva, but these discovery cost you money as a founder, right? And it all depends upon the network of the angels or the investor which you have, which will allow you to experiment and fail. And that failure will cost money. How's those conversations? If it is confidential, you can skip it. But I just want to know, because I'm sure a lot of other founders will be wondering, can I take that
Yeah.
plunge? Can I take
Yeah.
that experiment? Because these experiments will cost money, right?
Experiments definitely cost money. Again, when you talk about institutional investors, you will generally see, and that's what I recommend highly, that they would have you first sign off a strategy, right? There's an approach towards experiments. It's a well guided approach. It's an approach which is together signed off.
Yeah.
And then if there is learning and if there is discovery and there is and which is inevitable, right? It is
Mm-hmm.
inevitable that you will not have learning. It definitely is commonly agreed as a learning.
Yeah.
The second aspect is, if you're not having that sort of an approach where you together understand what you want to achieve, etc., and you're going with the flow, which a lot of founders happen to do because it's a dynamic situation that you're facing, right?
Yeah.
I think it is on the investors, it is on the people who are with you, even on the high level management, who has to agree on making those mistakes. Now, have I made mistakes? I'm sure I have, but how has been the investors? Again, investors also have this, if it's not institutional investors, they have a urgency of bringing return on their investment, right?
Yep.
It's very less that you find patient investors, and it's also speaking the investors language as well. It is also a high risk investment that they're looking at when they're investing in startups. So I think a word of caution for all investors to know that when they're putting off money, they're putting off money for that experiment to happen, they're putting off money for innovation to come up. From an investor's point of view, it is to understand that very logically, and I've been able to help my investor also understand this very logically, that boss, when you're putting in money in a company, that money is not being put that it will run indefinitely, right?
Yeah.
It will work out for an X amount of months, years, whatever that time frame is. And for you to understand what return you're getting, where this is going, what is happening, etc., you have to understand what that time frame is and what the scenarios within that time frame can be.
Yeah.
And then look at it, right? So again, from an early stage company's point of view, if you're investing in that early stage venture, you have to understand that that money will last, let's say, 8 months or 10 months or 12 months at max, and what are the different scenarios that the startup will go through within those 12 months to ascertain what return that you will get, right? And of course, mistakes can sometimes be very costly. I think honesty definitely helps. I've been very honest with my investors. In fact, not just that, Good Piggy from day zero has adopted a strategy where anybody who showed us investor interest, anyone who I have met personally, have always been reported back to on a quarterly basis, right? So we have a bunch of 200 investors per se as a bank who we quarterly report to, even if they have invested or not invested in the startup, just to make sure that they have interest, or they can keep tab of what they didn't invest in, right? And world is very small. I firmly believe that it's a really small world. We end up meeting each other again and again in different circumstances and situations. And it's very important for a startup to make sure that those folks who ever wanted to help you out and to stand by you also know your progress and journey, right? Not just the ones who've actually invested in you. So, of course, the level of communication and the information you declare to both parties will be very different. But I think a common dialogue or a one-on-one dialogue is very important, even if it's not reciprocated to.
Yeah.
I have always realized people always are reading those emails. They're always reading that report or post or whatever that is, in terms of whatever communication channel we are choosing. But it's important to keep that loop, right? Because again, the world is very small and we will see that ripple effect in business.
I hope you enjoyed this clip from my podcast series called Masters Decoded. The intention of bringing these clips to you is to allow you to understand some key moments of the conversations I've had with my guest. I would recommend and highly encourage you to listen to the entire podcast, which you can find the link to the podcast in the description below. I look forward to you subscribing to my channel and hit the bell icon so that you can be notified of all the future clips which we keep releasing every week on this channel.